Hello everyone! How is your Ielts course going? Well, I hope it's going well. Alright, so in this tutorial, we're gonna discuss multiple choice questions, especially the ones you encounter in section 2 of Ielts listening test. In addition to this, I'm gonna reveal some tips for you, and also we're gonna do one exercise together. Alright, let's get started. Okay, first of all, let's look at the format of section 2. Well, as you know, section 2 is a monologue, so that means one person speaking. And usually the topic is related to some kind of tour, or I don't know, a radio talk. And sometimes there are two speakers, but it's a very rare case. You know, section 2 is unique because it has a variety of question types. For instance, you might get filling in the gap type questions, and also you can get multiple choice questions. You can get matching type questions that we discussed in other tutorials. So it's a mixture of all kind of questions. Also noteworthy is that there are variations of multiple choice questions. So here is the variation number 1. This question is a multiple choice question encountered in section 2 or in section 3. And your task is to pick up 2 letters out of 5. In other words, 2 options out of 5. That's variation number 1. We also have variation number 2. It's our common, very usual, very common multiple choice question like ABC, and you just have to pick just one letter, one option. Okay, let's move to our tips. So here is the tip number 1, and it is called pay attention to signpost language. What is signpost language, right? Well, basically, signpost language is a word. For instance, a word like firstly, secondly, thirdly, subsequently, lastly, finally. So these are the words that help us to connect our ideas, right? To construct the sentences in a coherent way. So you have to know these signpost language, right? And you have to pay extra attention because the speakers will use these little connecting words to jump from one part of the conversation to another part. So if you guys are familiar with signpost language, then you'll find it way easier to follow what speakers are talking about. Okay, now let's move to our tip number 2. Analyze mistakes with a tape script. Yes, you heard it right. Tape script. When you finish any listening section, you better go and find tape script of that recording. And you have to redo that section again by analyzing your mistakes together with the tape script. So you listen while you're reading the tape script. And if you do so, you better understand the context. You can better integrate into that situation. And in regard to step-by-step instructions, I would recommend to highlight the words that you don't know inside the tape script. And you have to learn those words, understand in what context they're used, and with what kind of prepositions they are applied, or what are the examples, right? What are the specific cases? Because, you know, at the end of the day, it all boils down to your vocabulary. If you know the words, if you know their meaning and the context they're applied in, then I'm sure there are not going to be problems in terms of comprehension. So please analyze your mistakes with a tape script. If it requires so, please do exercises again, over and over, until you understand every single word inside the tape script. That's how you hack your skills. Okay, it's time to move on to our exercise.
Okay, now let's practice together. Look at this exercise. You have 30 seconds to look through the questions from 11 to 15. Please pause the video and take your time. Okay, now let's begin with question 11.
First of all, let me thank you all for coming to this public meeting to discuss the future of our town. Our first speaker is Shona Ferguson from Barford Town Council. Shona.
Thank you. First, I'll briefly give you some background information. Then I'll be asking you for your comments on developments in the town. Well, as you don't need me to tell you, Barford has changed a great deal in the last 50 years. These are some of the main changes. 50 years ago, buses linked virtually every part of the town and the neighbouring towns and villages. Most people used them frequently, but not now, because the bus companies concentrate on just the routes that attract most passengers. So parts of the town are no longer served by buses. Even replacing old, uncomfortable buses with smart new ones has had little impact on passenger numbers. It's sometimes said that bus fares are too high, but in relation to average incomes, fares are not much higher than they were 50 years ago.
Okay guys, let's figure out the answer for question 11. So, look at the tape script. Shona says the following. So if you read that, well, this means that buses are not used by people nowadays, due to the fact that those companies are no longer offering routes in parts of the town. And even changing buses with the new ones didn't increase the number of passengers, not to mention that fares are not also that much expensive. So, accordingly, the right answer is C. And if you noticed, letters A and B were just distractors to just confuse you from the right option C. Okay, what's next? Question 12.
Changes in the road network are affecting the town. The centre was recently closed to traffic on a trial basis, making it much safer for pedestrians. The impact of this is being measured. The new cycle paths separating bikes from cars in most main roads are being used far more than was expected, reducing traffic and improving air quality.
Guys, the answer for question 12 is B, because the speaker says changes in the road network are affecting the town. The new cycle path separating bikes from cars in most main roads are being used far more than was expected, reducing traffic and improving air quality. So, the phrase far more than expected is a paraphrased version of the phrase given in the question, benefited the town the most. So that's why we are choosing the letter B. Okay, following is question 13.
And although the council's attempts to have a bypass constructed have failed, we haven't given up hope of persuading the government to change its mind. Shopping in the town centre has changed over the years. Many of us can remember when the town was crowded with people going shopping. Numbers have been falling for several years, despite efforts to attract shoppers, for instance by opening new car parks. Some people combine shopping with visits to the town's restaurants and cafés. Most shops are small independent stores, which is good, but many people prefer to use supermarkets and department stores in nearby large towns, as there are so few well-known chain stores here.
Guys, what's the answer for question 13? Correct. It's the B. You know, the speaker tells us most shops are small independent stores, which is good, but many people prefer to use supermarkets and department stores in nearby large towns, as there are so few well-known chain stores here. Well, again, the letters A and C are distractors, and speaker didn't explicitly mention that lack of restaurants or parking spaces is the core factor behind the shopping problems faced by dwellers in Barford. The speaker just added off-topic or just extra information by mentioning restaurants and parking just to trick you guys. So next time, be careful with that. Next is question 14.
Turning now to medical facilities. The town is served by family doctors in several medical practices, fewer than 50 years ago, but each catering for far more patients. Our hospital closed 15 years ago, which means journeys to other towns are unavoidable.
Okay, the answer for question 14 is the letter A. Because, according to the speaker, the hospital was closed down 15 years ago, right? Okay, lastly, we have question 15.
On the other hand, there are more dentists than there used to be. Employment patterns have changed along with almost everything else. The number of schools and colleges has increased, making that the main employment sector. Services such as website design and accountancy have grown in importance, and surprisingly perhaps, manufacturing hasn't seen the decline that has affected it in other parts of the country.
Finally, the answer for question 15 is C. Because the speaker says the number of schools and colleges has increased, making that the main employment sector. And the key word here is the word main. This implies that education is the largest employment sector. And since schools and colleges are educational establishments, it's obvious to choose the letter C. Okay, we're done.
Okay, this is the end of this tutorial. I just want to wish you all the best. Please keep practicing consistently, because the consistency is the key for your success. And yeah, if you have any questions, please reach us out on our Clover Lab Instagram channel. See you next time.